So we've got a great panel today. We're going to be talking about innovation and access to funding to support innovation. Obviously, times of upheaval and crisis are also times of really rapid change, lots of ideas, people doing things very differently. And there has been sort of support coming through for that innovation. So we really wanted to put today's event on just to highlight some of those opportunities, where to access it, how to access it, and also how to put yourself in a good position for success. So we will frame today's discussion around health innovation specifically, and funding opportunities through Innovate UK, which Layla is well placed to talk about, and we'll be drawing on some different perspectives. Before we kick off, I'm just going to put up a quick poll for those that have joined us, just to get a sense of people's experience with this type of funding to date. So I'll just leave that to run for a short time as people are arriving. Before we kick off, just to say a few words about who I am and who we are and why we're putting this event on. So my name's Ruth Gripper. I lead on business engagement for the Inclusivity Project. We're an ERDF funded project. We are here to support business growth and development here in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. We've got a particular focus on health in the workplace, and work led by the University of Exeter, which is where I'm based, but working with our partners, Age UK, Disability Cornwall, and the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Enterprise Partnership. So a range of different perspectives, but all feeding into trying to support healthy and inclusive growth among Cornwall's business community. So that's who we are. We'll just share the results of the poll to get a sense of who's here and what their level of experience is. The way today is going to work is that I will shortly hand over to Layla Burrows to introduce a bit more about Innovate UK, what that funding is, how it works, and how you can access it, before opening it out into a wider discussion with the rest of our panel, and taking your questions as we go. So if you've got comments or questions, do please pop them in the chat as we go along, and we'll take those at various points throughout the discussion. So I think that's it for the housekeeping. So without further ado, Layla, I will hand over to you.
Okay, so I'm just going to spend a few brief minutes explaining who I am and what I do. So do I just say, whoever's doing the slides, just you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So Layla Burrows. I work for an organisation called Business West, who are based in Bristol. Business West runs something called the Enterprise Europe Network, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's one of the Innovate UK networks. So I directly work to Innovate UK programmes, and my role is a funding and finance manager, and I run a small team across the region who support businesses on areas of investment, but primarily access to Innovate UK grant funding opportunities. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Innovate UK, they're part of Innovate UK Research and Innovation, which include research councils being primarily research focused and academic focused, with universities applying into the research councils, with Innovate UK being the supporting arm for SMEs and organisations. Innovate UK itself has got an annual budget of up to £500 million every year to invest in innovation, research and development projects. That budget does include the Enterprise Europe Network, who help businesses with international business engagement. The Knowledge Transfer Network, which you may have been familiar with, who are more sector-specific advisors, and then can help, especially if you're looking to partner with a university perhaps, and the catapults, of which there are 9 across the UK, which are physical centres of excellence in different sectors. So that budget does incorporate that, but essentially Innovate UK have money to invest in innovation and R&D projects. Next slide, please. So what does that funding really look like? I mean, there are lots of other funding pots, especially in Cornwall, for innovation or R&D projects. Funding from Innovate UK, typically the size of the projects they'll fund range anywhere from 25,000 up to 2 million. So it's quite wide ranging. Any organisation, any legal entity can apply to Innovate UK of any size. Universities can apply, charities can apply, sole traders. What I would say is that about 1/3 of all Innovate UK grant beneficiaries are what we would call a micro company or pre-revenue or pre-startup. So don't let it put you off if you are not yet trading or you're a new company. About 1/3 of all of their grant money will go into pre-revenue and micro companies. They really solely exist to support disruptive innovation. I mean, these are sort of buzzwords, disruptive, game changing, but essentially they're only going to fund things that are going to make a significant impact within a sector and that are unique products and services that are not yet in the marketplace. So they're not going to fund incremental improvement on existing services. It's got to be quite a distinct, game-changing product, process, or service. Typically, their grants are funded anything up to a 70% intervention rate. So what does that mean? It means that you've got to find or fund the other 30% or up to 65% of that grant. So you will not get, with the exception of a few recent COVID-related grants, you typically have to find match funding for that grant. And it is worth noting that you typically have to cash flow your project and then you get your grant payments back in arrears. So that does prove difficult for startups. However, we can go on to discuss that later in the call. Zoom. They're looking for projects anywhere between 6 months up to 3 years. So you can have a short grant. It could be £100,000 over 6 months. That's fine. It's quite wide ranging. And for those of you who have experienced it, it is an online application, but it is competitive. And then the next slide, I was just going to say, this is where our team at the Enterprise Europe Network support is that we'll help you understand which opportunities might be right for you or not right for you. That's okay. We can help you, guide you through all the questions and help you get to the conclusion whether you should apply or shouldn't, it's not bad if you actually at the end of the day think, do you know what, this just isn't for me. At least you've had that conversation and you understand the opportunity. We'll also assess eligibility of your project, whether it's something that Innovate UK would be interested in funding, your company. Grant funding can be quite a long-term opportunity. You might be looking at 6 months before applying to actually getting your grant. So does that work for you? We'll help you shape your application. We do not help write it. There are other companies that may be able to lend a bit more of a hand in writing, and I'm not. I'll let. I can see Jackie's on the phone. I'm not going to speak for her, but there are other companies that might be able to also lend support to complement what we do. And we'll screen an application before it's submitted. So making sure that you've got all the right elements in there. Basically, we'll send it back as a Word document with red all over it, and say, actually, you know, don't put that in, you haven't addressed this, that sort of thing. So it's quite a hand-holding process, really. So yeah, we're here to answer any initial inquiry right through to helping you submit that application. And I think that's a quick intro, really. I don't know what the next slide is, but that's essentially what we do.
Thanks, Layla. That's really great, and probably a good time to bring in Jeremy and Sebastian, who can both talk about their sort of practical experience of doing this. But just for organisations to be aware of that service that you provide, and that help and advice that you can provide, and particularly, as you say, about judging whether this is something for you or not, sounds really valuable. I'm going to hand over first of all, if I could, to Sebastian, who I think is on the line. So Dr. Sebastian Brown is Research Director at Sage Tech Medical Equipment and has some experience of applying for this type of funding. So Sebastian, if you're there, and yep. Just invite you to share your experience at Sage Tech.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay, Ruth? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So basically I'm a doctor in anaesthesia and intensive care, and I developed technology to recycle anaesthetic gases, which are expensive and pollutants. And basically we set up a company which is called Sage Tech to take that to market. And the first interaction we had with Innovate UK was in a scheme called Smart Grants. And so we applied for a proof of market grant through the Smart Grant scheme, and that was successful. And that was a small grant of around about £20,000, which covered us to get access to essentially consultants who did a kind of market analysis. And this was a really good starting point for us, because it kind of told us about the market opportunity, enabled us to go out and seek investment with some hard sort of data, essentially on what the market opportunity was. We then applied for a proof of concept grant through the same kind of system. It was all part of this Smart Grant scheme. And we were unsuccessful twice in that process. And it's kind of taught us quite a lot. It caused quite a lot of problems in the company in terms of, in terms of timelines, because then we were sort of had to slow down a bit, and, continually reapplying for applications took quite a lot of effort. And I think a lot of confidence was lost in terms of whether or not we would succeed with Innovate UK funding. And so we continued for a period with just private funding, and then actually got re-engaged back with Innovate UK in quite a different way. And we found this to be much more successful. And basically, because this is for a much higher value grant. So we then received a medicines and manufacturing grant, which is around about £800,000, and some of that went to Exeter University, and then the rest is a 45% match for the equipment that we buy, essentially, and some of the salaries associated with supporting it. And so this was a big grant for us, there is a very different process, I felt, between, and there's a good reason for that, between the very small grants, the sort of £20,000, and then the much bigger grants that are available. And you do need to appreciate what Innovate UK are looking for in those. And what I would say is, for the small funds and stuff, you can come at that as a smaller company, and you can just put an application in and seek advice from, the groups like Business West and groups like that, just to try and get you in the ballpark. And there's a reasonable chance that you might succeed. But when it comes to the bigger grants, I would suggest trying to engage with Innovate in a slightly different way, which is to actually, find out a lot about the grant that's being offered, and who kind of is offering the grant within the organizations, and how, the people that are involved in delivering that grant, and why they wrote the specifications in the way they wrote the specifications, and just to totally make sure that your organization does fit the criteria that they're looking for. because from their perspective, when they write the grant, you know, there's obviously an intention to support a certain sector of the industry, but, you know, they have to write a fairly generic document, but really their intention and what they're looking for doesn't always quite get into that document in exactly the way that, you know, you read it, and there's a lot of bias in, you know, your interpretation of that document. So it's really helpful to engage with Innovate UK, find out who your local Innovate UK lead is, and go and speak to them about your company, get them to come and see your company and talk to them about where you're going, what the project is you wanted to deliver. And so we did that. We engaged with Innovate UK. They came to the lab and they saw what we were trying to do. We talked to them about the grants that were available, and we talked to them about the support that was there. And then they put us in touch with the people who actually kind of wrote the grant specification, and we asked them whether or not we were eligible, and we addressed any concerns that they might have about eligibility. And so that put us on, I think, quite a different playing field, because it basically kind of tied off a lot of the need to haves before we started writing the application. So we knew that we were definitely eligible. We knew we fitted a lot of the criteria that they wanted as additional features in the application. And then we got engaged with a grant writer support, some writing support, and that was through a similar thing to Business West, essentially. And that I think provided the final stepping stone, where essentially we wrote the grant application and then we're sending it backwards and forwards. And you do need a multiple kind of iteration support on this. So I would suggest trying to, you know, once you know that you're definitely eligible and that the grant is there and that they think you might be suitable, then actually going and engaging somebody who can help you with the grant writing process. It just enables you to demonstrate the company in its best light, and also show that you've got processes in place that can manage the funds and report on them properly, so that Innovate UK have got some faith that you'll be able to deliver on the promises that you make. And so yeah, I think there's essentially a two stream approach to it. You know, one is the small grants where you can kind of have a go and get in without perhaps having so much scrutiny and effort. But for the bigger grants, you really do need to engage with Innovate UK quite broadly before you make the application, so that you can, you know, you tick the criteria, and so that they're aware of you and have essentially done some of the due diligence on you before your application lands on their desk.
Yeah, and that sounds like quite an involved process. Like you have to put the time in to make that effort and to have that level of engagement. But I guess you made the decision that was going to be worth it because of what it could mean for you in the longer run.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really big effort to go back into the grant scheme, and there was some resistance in the company as to whether or not we should put our efforts in that direction, or whether it would almost be easier just to raise money privately. But it was definitely worth it. I mean, not just because of the success, you know, the fact that you've raised money, but also because it comes with a certain level of kind of sort of diligence that has to go with it, so that you manage the fund properly and report on it properly, and that's good for the business in general. So I think it was definitely worth doing. But I appreciate, you know, for a lot of companies, it's a big ask to go through that process. But I think that's why, you know, getting the advice in early is a really good way of doing it, because what you mustn't do is put all that effort in just to find that you don't really fit the criteria, because otherwise your application won't get past the first round, no matter how good all the rest of it is. I would say that, I mean, the other thing is we applied for it in conjunction with Exeter University, who are doing an environmental and cost benefit analysis for us. And that really helped. You know, having collaborations with the public sector is a really good thing to do. And it's but again, that takes a lot of time to develop, because you basically have to get all the paperwork and all the agreement pretty much sorted out before you put your application in, because there isn't very much time. to get it all together, and they need quite a high degree of kind of paperwork to go with it, you know, contracts and things like this. So it's definitely worth putting the, you know, the more you can do before you put the application in, the better. Don't put the application in and think you can work it out as you go along. It's much better to just prepare the ground first and put the application in, you know, as the final step.
Yeah, that's great, Sebastian. So I'm sure we'll come back to you and pick up on some of those points a bit more further on in the conversation. I would just say, if people have got questions in the chat to put those in, and in fact I see we've got one already directed at you, actually, in terms of the process. Did the process of putting the grant together change aspects of what you wanted to do?
No, it didn't, and I think that's really important. If you, I mean, I suppose there's two different viewpoints on this, because we've come at it from one direction, but I think one of the things that we did find looking at other grants is if you're applying for a grant that actually you think, well, you know, it would be nice to get this grant, but actually it doesn't, you know, we'd have to do quite a lot of stuff differently, or this isn't quite what we really wanted, then it probably shouldn't really apply for the grant. And that's when talking to Innovate UK about it's really helpful, because it's a waste of your effort, and it's a waste of, you know, their time assessing it, essentially, if you go and apply for a grant you're not eligible for. And I think if you start changing things a lot, then you've got to question whether or not really that grant is suitable for you.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn now to Jeremy Sneller, who's also on the call. So Jeremy is the Chief Executive of Touchbyte, and similarly has been through that experience of applying for funding with Innovate UK. So I'll just turn to Jeremy for his experience of that process, and then we'll come back and pick up some more of the questions that are coming through.
Hi everybody. Yeah, as I say, my name is Jeremy Sneller. I run a company called Touchbyte, and we basically look at new innovations around face recognition. So it's been unusual, based down in Falmouth, to be sort of a bleeding edge innovative company, but that's what we decided to do. And we basically we're looking at applications outside of the government in terms of police, border control, passport control, and so on. And initially we started off looking at retail and sort of hospitality as two sectors, and we were sort of developing various applications along that line. And then we approached the guys from University of Exeter, Smartline, and started to look at other opportunities. And we looked at the sort of the e-health, e-wellbeing type of marketplace. And we worked very closely with the guys, and we got a small grant to basically look at some research around the market and as to what was going on around potentially opportunities for face recognition. So that was the first sort of pass, which proved very useful. And out of that, we moved on to a sort of a second phase of looking at a particular site. And we came across, working with the guys, the Cornwall Health, Cornwall 111 site, where we basically developed and produced a door access solution for them, because they were having issues around people arriving, not knowing necessarily the codes to access the building, and so on, and causing some delay in doing that. So we came up with an idea, we came up with a prototype, and we installed that into the site in Truro, in Trevisk. And that was then put onto the drugs cupboard, which was quite useful for them, actually accessing the drugs using face rather than any other sort of PIN code or whatever. So that was very good. And then we were sort of hit with the situation we're in now, and which prompted us to rethink about the solution again. So at the moment, it was a push button solution. So somebody had to press the button, and if they were enrolled on the system, they could actually gain access to the drugs cupboard or the building. But obviously nobody really wants to touch anything anymore. So we then heard about the Innovate UK funded project for the 40 million that was allocated to small sort of startup companies with ideas to look at the sort of COVID situation. And we then also heard of an opportunity within the construction sector where construction sites were closed and couldn't open because they were using fingerprint technology. So again, we then thought, well, we could pivot and innovate around our solution and produce a solution that was actually contactless. So we put forward the idea, and yeah, again, Layla was influential in supporting that, and came back with some useful comments for us. And yeah, we heard literally 2 weeks ago that we managed to get through, and we got the offer letter yesterday that actually we're going to be funded to do this particular project for the construction industry. So it's fantastic to have gone through that process. So, you know, we started with an idea that was validated, we then proved it, put it into a proof of concept that again innovated again and went and was designed and was changed to meet another sector. So that was, you know, our sort of journey, and we're now also then talking with Emma and the team about another idea that we've got for monitoring calls like this. So you're validating with face recognition either end of a call. So for a patient talking to a doctor, you're making sure using face recognition that they are the correct people either end of the call, and we're doing some work around evaluating whether that's an idea as well. So we're doing some initial work with Emma and the team around that. So yeah,
an really exciting time to be at Touchbyte, Jeremy. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I guess what advice would you give to people on the call that are thinking about whether this is something for them or how they might go about it?
I think it's massively important to get the team that you're working with on side and supporting. I think without saying too much, Emma was massively influential in actually getting us through that process for the early stages of actually defining and helping us. It does take a lot of time and effort to fill in all the forms and so on, and without somebody coaching you and helping you to sort of pull it together, I don't know that we would be as successful as we have been. So I think that's important. Also, and I think looking at the questions and actually understanding what the answers to the questions and making sure you're actually responding in a correct way to what they're asking, I think is massively important. Certainly the more recent one we've done, which was the larger one, is just really looking at the points that you need to, or the questions you need to address and address them properly, because sort of points mean prizes. So, you know, it's very important that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's sort of basic due diligence about really understanding what's being asked and whether it, you know, whether it fits with where you are.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Do keep those questions coming in. Jeremy mentioned about the support from Exeter University and particularly from Emma, who we do have on the call, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, about you know, if you're not quite at the point of perhaps being ready to apply for something like this just yet, how you can sort of take the steps towards getting there. But before we do that, I wanted to bring in Marc Barlow, formerly head of global marketing at GE Healthcare, and Marc is now involved both in the Smartline and the Inclusivity Project, helping to sort of review applications for the work that we do with local businesses. Marc, I'd be interested to hear whether what Jeremy and Sebastian have been saying sort of chimes with your experience as someone on the receiving end of applications. You know, what do you look for when people are getting in touch?
Great. Can you hear me? Just to check that.
We can, but you're quite quiet.
Okay. Let me just, maybe I'll take my headset off. How's that? Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, good. The headset must be not working too well. Yeah, I think that was very, very clear what Jeremy said was saying there, and I think it does sort of chime very well with, you know, the sort of, I was not directly involved myself, but I've been involved on the kind of periphery of Innovate UK bids when I was at G Healthcare, so I've got some experience of that. And, you know, in terms of thinking about a bid and how you might be successful, the things that come through to me, and actually I shared with Ruth this morning a very interesting, I think, resource. It was a competition that was really for looking for Innovate UK to support SME support, evaluating innovative medical technologies. And it's a list of all of those companies that were successful. And what was really interesting to me is all of those companies that were successful, there's a brief summary of what the solution offers. And what was very clear to me when I read through those was a very clear articulation of what problem that was being solved, clearly what benefits were being delivered. And these were innovative medical technologies. So, you know, the benefits that are being delivered to different stakeholders, be that to the patient, be that to the doctor, be that to the institution, to the NHS. Also very much focused on the outcomes that are being impacted by the technology or the solution. So how it improved, be it a clinical outcome, a financial outcome, an operational outcome, and I think increasingly what I'm seeing is an environmental outcome. That was coming through strongly in the profiles of these winning submissions. And the other thing was also a clear articulation. What evidence do you need to generate in order to drive the adoption of these technologies? So how are you going to prove to people the value that they deliver, and also make sure that people are going to be willing to buy them or pay for them? So I think those are the things that sort of came through. And I did take the opportunity to look at what Jeremy and Seb, you know, their companies, and you can clearly see when going through their information, again, clear articulation of those things: the problem, the benefits, and the outcomes that are being impacted that really benefit the customer. So those are the things that really, and when I'm sitting on the other end of reading a kind of a grant application come through, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. How well do you understand the problem? What is the benefit that's being, how innovative is it? And really, how does this impact the outcomes that are important, you know, to the system? So that's what I would say.
Great, thanks, Marc. And we'll come back to Layla in just a moment to see if that chimes with your perspective. Before I do that, I just wanted to turn back to Jeremy and Sebastian and see if there's anything that either of you would add on that, tips and advice around how you can put yourself in the best position, or, you know, things to avoid, stuff that you have learned through this process and you think, if only I'd known that from the outset, to add in before we turn back to Layla.
No, not from me.
I think you know, some of what Marc was saying is actually very valid. Certainly, you know, from our side of things, because we're dealing with solving problems that are out there, is to understand what the problem is that you're actually solving. So for us, you know, in the latest one with the construction industry, yeah, we knew there was a problem. They couldn't open sites because they hadn't got fingerprint. You know, the fingerprint was not going to be a solution. They needed, from a health and safety point of view, they needed to know who was on site and so on. And we put that very strongly across to actually say, well, look, we can produce a contactless version. So we were addressing a problem and very clearly defining what the benefit on the back of it was. So I think that probably helped, you know, us actually achieve the sort of the latest funding round, which was yeah.
I suppose I'd actually, you know, I totally agree with Jeremy and Marc on this. When we applied for the Smart grant, and I mean that, I actually felt that structure really helped us, because it was separated into a proof of market, proof of concept, and then a prototyping section, and the amounts went up and the percentage of match went down, but it forced you to do things in the right order. And it essentially, when you got started on it, it then kind of built you the data to apply for the next section. So I do think that was really helpful in terms of just giving a business a bit of a kind of a guidance as to how you need to build how you build a product and take it to market without, you know, and make sure that it's actually a product that people want.
Great, thank you. Layla, I'm gonna hand back to you and see if everything that our panel has been saying resonates with what you had planned to say around, you know, tips for people on the call that might be thinking about this for them.
Screen sharing, yeah. Yeah, totally. I think a lot of what Sebastian said was completely spot on, and these are the kind of I mean, you can all read that, but I would say to anyone who, once you've ascertained that you are eligible, as Sebastian said, you know, speak to Innovate UK if you can. We can help you get to those contacts. You know, find out if you are eligible and whether that grant's actually right for you. But the main thing, I think, in terms of, yeah, give yourself enough time. Do not underestimate the amount of time that you will need and the amount of resource you'll need to put your application together. And that goes from working with your wider team to work out whether it's the right project for you, creating an application. I mean, to any Innovate UK application, it's 10 plus pages with appendices. You've got to upload your finances. If you're working with partners or collaborators, they've also got to upload their information. It can be incredibly administrative, plus don't underestimate the time it takes to actually get that content right, and secondly, get it reviewed. Ask people to read it. I've just seen Emma's question there. Timetable, unfortunately not. It's a case of getting their updates online, which I think I've got a slide later. But get as many people as you can to review your proposal. We do that for free. There are other organisations who do that as well. But you know, ask your colleagues, your partner, your mum, your uncle, whoever, to read it, because at the end of the day, if it's not clear to another individual or another professional, it's not going to be clear to the assessor either. And you understand your technology and your business inside out, but the art of this is to keep something very simple and clear that an assessor who knows nothing about your company will understand. So KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So I mean, that it goes without saying, don't overcomplicate content. Innovate UK do not want reams and reams of technical data at all. They want a simple narrative which gives an introduction to the company, an introduction to the team behind it, evidence that you've got clear deliverables and a work program, that you know how you're going to take this product to market at the end of the day, and that essentially you're you know, a safe pair of hands to deliver the project. And the applications that I review that are you know, they're very clever, very high level, but I will read them and I've got, you know, 3 pages in and I'm still not quite sure what the project is. Keep it simple.
And we've got a question later on the chat from Steve about how outcomes are defined or measured and evaluated.
Do you mean, Steve, if you've got a project, or whether you're or at the time of application? Well, both. Outcomes are you will define your own outcomes within the parameters of the project. So you'll be asked, what is in the questions, what is the outcome of the project? Which you know, is it a prototype? Is it a new? Is it a piece of research? You know, what is the definitive output, which you define? But essentially, what Innovate UK are looking for is commercialisation. and at the end of that project that you're taking yourself or your company further up what they call the technology readiness level scale. So you're taking something from feasibility and proof of concept through to prototyping. You may have validated that and you understand that it does work in the marketplace, and you can then prove that. But essentially every single project is going to be different with the definition and the evaluation of the intended outcome, because it's up to you to define those parameters. If you get the money and for whatever reason something fails, you're not, Innovate UK are not going to ask for that money back at all if you don't meet those deliverables. The worst that would happen is that your project would cease and stall. But we can explain that more when there's a bit of a chat, I think.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'll keep it short, but it is essentially, for those of you who have done it, I would say approach it like an exam. Answer the questions in the application. Don't approach it as though you want to tell Innovate UK exactly what you want to say. Answer the questions. Each of the questions are scored. So if you do not tell Innovate UK what they're asking for or reference it, you quite simply don't get a point. And there's a set of guidelines. They are lengthy, they are boring, but have that open as you go through each question, because no matter how fantastic and brilliant your innovation is, and it's very clear in a summary as to how game-changing that's going to be, if you do not follow the structure and answer the questions in their structure and what they're asking of you, it will not be funded. But that's something that we can help support with, and as we do a review, we'll help identify, or you haven't addressed your intellectual property, you haven't addressed your freedom to operate, all of those sorts of things. And there is a very clear approach it as you would an exam or even a job application. Sort of going back to what Sebastian was saying, if your project doesn't meet the criteria, it won't be funded. If you're applying for a job that says we need someone who speaks fluent French, and you say, well, I've got a bit of conversational French, you're not going to get the job. Similar with an Innovate UK application, you've got to.
So it's that basic stuff, but there is help available and help out there. So make use of it.
There is help.
Sounds like the message.
And we help you, get into the assessor's mindset. And I've just the last point there, which I put across. Ambiguity. Every single statement you make in an application has to be validated, backed up, and with references. Don't put lots of lovely blue sky. We wish that, we believe that. Wouldn't it be nice if you've got every single thing has got to be a very hard hitting point.
Great. And just one detailed question on the application form and the way that scoring works. So are those questions scored independently, or can you assume that it's one person looking at the whole application, and if put information in one bit that they will
each application into Innovate UK will be reviewed by up to 5 independent assessors, so not employees of Innovate UK. They could be people like any of you in this call. You can register to be an assessor. Those assessors, so they will all score it out of 100.
So they would each see the whole application?
Yeah, they all see the whole application. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying make it a narrative. Don't make that assessor has probably got an hour and a half to read your whole application, of which you have put in weeks of work. We may have put in hours and days of reviewing it with you. That assessor will spend about an hour and a half reading it. So you have got to capture their mind, you've got to convince them with your narrative that they should fund you.
I'm worried that we're going to be putting people off and making this sound like a very daunting process, and I'm conscious that a lot of people on the call, this isn't something that they've done previously. I hope Jeremy and Sebastian's experience might get people thinking, but I want to make sure we've got time to bring in Emma Seymour from Smartline, and can talk a bit about what support there might be for people who might be a bit earlier stage, and how people can get towards that point where they are in a position to be applying for these kinds of funds. So Emma, do you want to say a bit about the support available from the University of Exeter?
Yeah, what I would, just before I go through the support, for those of you who don't know what the Smartline project is, Smartline is a collaborative project led by the University of Exeter in partnership with Coastline Housing, Cornwall Council, Volunteer Cornwall and the South West Academic Health Science Network. And the aim of the project is supporting the development of an innovative e-health and e-wellbeing enterprise sector, and to drive improvements in health and wellbeing outcomes. In terms of how we're helping SMEs in Cornwall, Isles of Scilly, and you've heard a bit from Jeremy, we're really helping companies to develop innovative products, services and processes by exploring how technology can be used to improve people's health and well-being. And we're helping to de-risk the research, development and innovation process by offering collaborative research schemes which reflect enterprise needs. So we have created these from feedback from enterprises. So in this table, it's a bit kind of wordy, but we have a kind of process we go through. So first of all, when we speak to an enterprise, we really need to understand the challenges and issues you're facing. So we do a knowledge exchange report, which is a real diagnostic. So we can kind of scope out kind of where potential collaboration is. And then further in that, we actually have schemes that we've got an idea generation grant, and this is relatively small scale funding, but that's really to help work up innovative ideas. And then in residence, what we found, and this is really popular scheme, and this is something that Jeremy used, was that you have these amazing ideas, but you don't actually have the time to take away from your company's day-to-day activities. So what we do is we actually pay for your time to spend time with our researchers to better understand and cultivate the research opportunities available. And then from that, we have follow-on funds, and these are larger grants. So we have a follow-on research grant, and that tends to follows on from the in-residence scheme. So there you've kind of explored, you've seen that there's an opportunity, and it's actually how can you address that opportunity. So going back to what Marc was saying, in terms of you're understanding the problem you're trying to solve and you're addressing the problem. So really the in-residence is helping with that, understanding the problem you're trying to solve. How do you address it? And then the follow-ons help to kind of look at what you can do to develop that. Within Smartline, we actually have Coastline is our partner, and we started in 2017, and we've actually used their households to have some of their participating, and we've recruited over 300 households and put sensors in there to kind of understand both the internal and external environment. So those data sets now, because we started in 2017, there's lots of information that's freely available that can be shared. And also kind of working with businesses, we've learned that a lot of people come to us and says, well, actually, how do I evaluate the impact I'm having? I've got this innovation, but actually, how do I evaluate it? So we've actually created workshops around evaluating the wellbeing impact, but also a new thing that's coming out is the social return on investment. And also, we've just had an extension. We've done 3 years, we've been extended for another 3 years. And South West Academic Health Science Network is now a delivery partner. And we are going to be running workshops with them, market insight surgery. So that's really looking at your scaling up opportunities, where are the gaps, how can you progress what you're doing? And then there's the Smartline Spread Academy program, and that's really helping you identify how you can spread and kind of build your business.
Always good when the chair unmutes themselves. Thanks, Emma, for that information about Smartline. I'm just going to say a few words about the Inclusivity Project as well, which sort of works on a similar basis to Smartline in terms of the support that we're able to offer. So that's advice and sort of essentially consultancy, that in-residence research partnership, so a relatively short-term, small-scale partnership with you, where your time is funded to engage with that. Our time is fully funded, so you'd be working with academics from the University of Exeter Business School, from the medical school, or from our partners Disability Cornwall, Age UK, and the LEP. And as Emma was saying, that's really aimed at helping you sort of get to the next stage, explore questions or develop ideas that you have so that you can move further along that innovation journey. We also, hot off the press today, are launching some small-scale grants, again, which is really about helping you to get your idea off the ground. So take a look at our website or get in touch, and we can talk to you about how those work and whether they might be suitable for you. But the Inclusivity Project, our focus is really around health in the workplace. So your business might be all about sort of health and well-being. That might be what you offer, the product or service that you can offer to others, or you might be interested in what's happening within your own organisation and what innovations you can introduce within your own organisation to do things differently. In either case, do have a conversation with us, because we might be able to support you in some of these different ways. And that is, as I say, open and fully funded by ERDF, so that is available to Cornish SMEs. So we've got just a few minutes left. Please, if you have got any questions that haven't been answered, please do get those in the chat. I'm going to turn now to each of our panelists to wrap up, and to Layla to give us a steer on what's coming up, what people can look out for from Innovate UK. Layla, do you want to?
Just a few quick things. Innovate UK have rolling open competitions. We don't have foresight of what those competitions will be, but there is a specific COVID-related competition at the moment, which is under the UK Research Innovation umbrella. But if you have got a project that will directly support COVID-affected sectors, you could consider applying into this one, that we will support applications to. This is quite wide-reaching. There's no budget, there's no deadline. You can apply at any time for any COVID-related projects. There's that one. Next slide, please. There's also something called the Future Fund, which may or may not be relevant to the audience, but this is actually a loan, but aimed at companies who have actually got a history of raising investment or finance, and you must demonstrate that you've raised at least 250,000 over the last 5 years. But these loans can go up to 5 million that are matched with private investment. So that's a new product supported by Innovate UK with the British Business Bank. There is a chap called Lloyd Brinner in Cornwall who supports these applications. And then the next slide, please. Thank you. And there are also, if any of you have got an existing Innovate UK grant, they've got continuity loans to help you continue your project, basically, in times of COVID. At the moment, there will be lots of setbacks, you know, all sorts. So they have loans as well. And then I think the last slide is where you can get information. Or a slide up or something like that. Yeah. So
we'll be circulating resources to everyone that's been on the call. So we'll make sure people get the link of where they can be kept up to date with what's happening.
Yeah, but email
our contact details there.
Funding finance, and we can point you in the in the right direction of getting more support and newsletters, more emails in your inbox.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So to close, I'm just going to turn to each of our panelists and ask or invite you to share, I suppose, your closing comment, or what you would want people on the call to go away with from today. Who am I going to put on the spot first? Layla, given that you've just wrapped up, I'll ask you first and then turn to Jeremy and Sebastian.
Sorry, Ruth, I've just changed all my Zooms.
So your key takeaway for people that have been on the call today?
I think the key takeaway really is just to please consider asking for support. You know, don't do it on your own. Even picking up the phone and having half an hour on the phone, to the people within this call, can help you understand, and can help answer any questions you have and help you position yourself or understand whether it's relevant for you. Please don't get bogged down in all the ridiculously complicated websites that you can't find information from. Just call us and ask for help, and even if it's a half an hour, 1 hour phone conversation, we can help answer those questions and put your mind at ease as to whether it's the right opportunity for you or not.
Great, thank you. Marc, I'll come to you. What's been your key takeaway from today's discussion?
I think for me, it's really coming back to when you, in terms of the project you're running, having a clear understanding of, what problems does that solve? Which customer does it solve a problem for? Which customers? And really, how are you going to deliver the evidence that it does what it says it does, so that people will then invest in it, buy it, use it, whatever it is, and then also think about the techniques that you can use to basically to deliver those kind of insights. So things like observational research, customer journey mapping, design research, co-creation events. Think about those kind of things that can get you to that point of having that real understanding of the real difference that you're going to make. And I'm very happy to sort of follow up with people, after the call and talk through some of those kind of ideas of the ways that you can generate those kind of insights. So, because those will give you the real perspective on the difference that you're making.
Right. And it is worth saying that here in Cornwall there is a lot of different support available out there, and I mean sometimes the challenge can be finding what best fits what you need right now, but it is worth seeing what there is and taking advantage of it. Great, thank you. And then Sebastian, what's your key takeaway for people today?
Yeah, I'm actually totally in agreement with Layla. Really, actually, having gone through it unsuccessfully and successfully, I think getting in touch with the groups that are here in the Southwest to support you and advise you is really, really important. And it is daunting. You mentioned about being put off by it, and I think there's two aspects to that. One is a sort of a negative aspect to people then don't follow through, but actually it does make you think about your time, and your time as a business entrepreneur is valuable, and you can't afford to throw it away on wasteful applications for grants, especially when sometimes the grants are quite heavily subscribed. So go and make use of the resources that are there, get the help that you can do, and give yourself some time and produce the best application that you can for a grant that you're definitely eligible for. I would make use of that. There are lots of companies out there that help you with grant writing. I wouldn't necessarily go to them first. I would go and talk to the facilities that are there for you to access freely to start with, because that will you can use the other resources later on when you've got your message down and you know exactly what the grant is you're applying for. But when time and money is short, use the resources you've got and give yourself the best chance. That's it.
Thanks. And it is worth saying on that point that is potentially something that projects like the Inclusivity Project and Smartline can potentially help organisations with. So if that's something that people on the call are thinking about or interested in, then as I said, it is worth getting in touch with us, getting in touch with the support available to help you understand whether it's for you in the first place, and then to develop that application if you are going down that road. Jeremy, what's been your key takeaway for today?
Yeah, I think a lot of what's been said really do encourage everybody to do it. You know, it is definitely worth doing. You know, we've recruited on the back of having the funds available. We've actually got new products that we've developed that actually give us, you know, a greater chance of future success. And yeah, as I say, the support and so on that is available in Cornwall is second to none. And if you use it rightly, yeah, you can, I guess, achieve some significant sort of investment. So yeah, I'd encourage people to look at it really. It's definitely been worth it for us.
Brilliant, thank you. And Emma, before we close, is there anything you'd like to add from the Smartline perspective?
I just think, you know, if you have got an idea and you're unsure and you might kind of feel daunted, and especially I know kind of with the university and stuff, that we're there, and especially Ruth, myself, James is also on the call. You know, we're there to kind of talk to you, and also we can signpost you to other forms of support in Cornwall. So it's always worth picking up the phone or emailing us and having that initial chat, and then, you know, seeing how we can support you. And if we can't support you, then we can signpost you elsewhere, which other people have benefited from as well and found hugely helpful.
Great. So I think the main message there is to get in touch and take advantage of the support that is available. So thank you everyone who's joined us today. I hope it's been useful for you. As long as Layla's happy for us to share her slides, we will be sharing the slides with people, and pointing you to some other resources as well. I'll just take a moment to plug a couple of upcoming events we have at the Inclusivity Project, focused on those questions around health and inclusion in the workplace. So looking at how the current context of coronavirus is affecting the ways that we work. So details of that are on Eventbrite. I'll just take this moment to say thank you so much to all of our speakers who've joined us today, and thank you to everyone who's been on the call. Take care of yourselves, and hope to see you at an event either remotely or at some stage in person. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.